Hi, I'm Ian.
And I'm Jason.
And this is Ghosts and Bears, the only podcast where we bring you the actual ghost stories
With the actual history.
in the actual place. On this episode of Ghosts and Bears, we have something a little different. We've got some history, and we've definitely got some weird stories. So join us as we learn about the third man coming up on Ghosts and Bears. Hello, friends.
Hi, welcome back.
We are so glad to be back. Again, we've had a wild and crazy time, but things are good.
Yes. Well, we want to apologize. We have no idea how the mic was so bad last time. It didn't,
Oh my gosh.
It didn't even want to
So this
use
time-
our fancy stuff.
I double checked and triple checked and played back
Good.
and double checked again. So
Yeah.
now we know. We have been still going through that basement flood, so we are trying to manage that. And it looks like I got word today the drywall will be getting repaired
That's good.
to start, and then they have to do the floors
Yeah.
and then put in a new kitchen.
Yes.
That
Just
will
a
be
few
nice.
things.
Just a few things, a few small things. And that's exciting. I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the NBA continues on.
I was going to say the NBA marches on, sucking all life force out of both of us.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. I got some exciting news. I had my birthday, and Jason bought me the best present because I told him what I wanted. I got a shrimp tank with shrimpies.
Oh, right. The
Cherry
shrimp.
So exciting. And then what was the other thing? Oh, I saw the cover. Hopefully, I just got word today, actually, from Tori that I saw the cover for the new Calgary's Most Haunted book. So as soon as I have that from her and I get the green light, I can share that with everybody. And I really like it. It looks like a really good cover.
These levels seem so low.
They look low, but don't worry, because what happens when we go back and we put on the filter, it bumps everything up. Trust me, I do this all the time. I know we're paranoid. I get it, but no, it's going to be fine. I promise.
What more can go wrong with this recording
Don't
equipment?
say that. Don't say that.
Well, seriously, I spent so much money on this stuff.
No, this is, you say crap like that and the hard drive fails. Just don't say stuff like that.
Don't fail, hard drive.
Okay, there you go. That's the way to do it. So Calgary's Most Haunted, and we're going to start getting to work on Canada's Most Haunted. So we signed off the documents on that.
Yeah.
And while Jason keeps plugging away at his MBA.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing degree, I must say.
You've learned a lot already.
Oh, yeah.
And I should add, you simultaneously started a new job.
Oh, yeah. In February.
And how's that going?
Like a crash course in finance. Yeah. So that's exciting.
You're doing
Other
fine,
than that, I think I'm doing okay.
We've got a bit of seasonal allergies. Spring has finally sprung all the way up here in the central part of British Columbia.
Lots of dust in the air.
Lots of dust, lots of pollen. So we're both kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah. Quit saying that. You said that like 300 times today.
I have no idea.
So, a little bit of a twist. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. That was weird with the voiceover of the episode, but I hope it worked for most people. We have... This kind of popped into my peripheral vision, and I was absolutely taken with it. And I thought this would be a really cool episode. The nice thing is it's not a place, so we're not keeping entirely with our place history ghost thing, but we are keeping with the history, and we are keeping with the ghost.
And that is how you pivot.
That is how you pivot. Look at you, Mr. MBA speak. Let's circle back to that.
We are going to circle back.
So, we are going to be talking about the third man syndrome.
Ooh, I got an A+ on my finance exam.
You did.
Holy smokes.
Very proud of
That
you
was
for that.
very difficult.
Yes, but you did it.
Yeah, I'm glad.
I'm not surprised.
And my simulator, I'm rocking.
That's
I'm
awesome.
rocking my Harvard simulator.
You'll do great. Well, you go back to school not this weekend because it's Easter, but next weekend.
No, because I need to do some projects I've got to get writing.
No. I mean, you go back to class.
I know that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I know.
you've
What
got
I'm
lots of
saying
work
is
to
this
do.
long weekend is just going to be writing projects.
I know. So we are going to be talking about the history of something called, like I said, third man syndrome.
Yeah, third man syndrome.
Third man factor.
You may have experienced it yourself.
I have.
Usually it's just before something that happens. It's interesting because I experienced it myself when I got into that car wreck, 2-3 years ago?
Yeah. Well,
And-
let's talk about it once we get through these stories. We'll talk about our own stories because I've got one and I've got a couple actually.
I said, yeah, again.
But you just stop. All right. So we're going to do the history right now.
It's going to be my thing now.
Jason's going to lead off with the history and then I'm going to jump in there as well.
So interesting. I was able to find out one of the more important persons in history that had third man syndrome is Sir Ernest Shackleton himself. So in his 1919 book, South, he described his belief that an incorporeal companion joined him and his men during the final leg of the 1914 to 1917 Antarctic expedition. They became stranded in packs of ice for more than 2 years and endured some of the most immense hardships in the attempt to reach safety. Shackleton wrote during that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me that we were 4, not 3. His admission resulted in other survivors of extreme hardship coming forward and sharing similar experiences.
Now, I love that because that is so typically human. Until someone of note or worthiness or renown or a real survivor shares something like that, people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's usually from cases of extremes. So pilots on solo flying missions or mountaineers or...
And Ernest Shackleton, I mean, he went through it. It was talked about in a 1922 modernist poem by T.S. Eliot, lines 359 through 365. The poem, The Wasteland, were inspired by Shackleton's experience, as stated by the author in the notes included with the work. It is the reference to the third in this poem that has given this phenomenon its name when it could occur to even a single person in danger. And the poem, the piece from the poem is, "Who is the third who walks beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman. But who is that on the other side of you?" That's from T.S. Eliot.
Yeah, The Wasteland. So in recent years, some well-known adventurers such as the climber Reinhold Messner and polar explorers Peter Hillary and Anne Bancroft have reported experiencing the phenomenon. One study of cases involving adventurers reported that the largest group involved climbers, with solo sailors and shipwreck survivors being the second most common group, followed by polar explorers. Similar experience was documented by mountain climber Joe Simpson in his 1988 book, Touching the Void, which recounts his near-death experience in the Peruvian Andes. Simpson describes a voice which encouraged him and directed him as he crawled back to base camp after suffering a horrible leg injury high in Ciudad Grande and falling off a cliff into a crevasse. Some journalists have reported related experiences that, such as the concept of guardian angel or an imaginary friend. Scientific explanations consider the phenomenon a coping mechanism or an example of bicameral
mentality.
Bicameral mentality. My apologies. The concept was popularized in an 2009 book by John Geiger, The Third Man Factor, which documents scores of examples.
And it does come up quite a bit. Modern psychologists have used the third man factor to treat victims of trauma. They call it the cultivated inner character, lends imagined support and comfort. Because, of course, we couldn't have something actually cool happening. We have to kind of make it, the brain is just imagining.
So is this a ghost in the machine? I'm not entirely sure.
I don't know. But we're going to hear a lot of stories about it. And we're going to talk about them, and we're going to try and figure it out together. So hopefully, by the end of this episode, we have some answers. But probably not. Stop saying yeah. All right, we'll be right back after this.
It's my in thing now.
Just shut up. All right, so we are going to be doing some of these stories.
Yeah, they're very short.
They are.
They're like toot sweet stories.
Well, they're basically people's experiences, and those are often pretty, to the point, which is not a bad thing. But they are very different, and there's a lot of different ones in here. Sometimes it's people in danger. Sometimes it's people in trauma. Sometimes they're in just kind of perilous places where it might not be sudden or instant, but there's some danger there. So we'll go through them, and let's talk about them.
Danger Will Robinson.
Oh, stop it. All right, I'm reading the first one.
Maybe he was third man syndrome.
When I was young, around 9 years old, I had pretty major surgeries for a birth defect. I was feeling sick, in pain, and frustrated about not being able to sleep or get out of bed. When I rang the bell for the night nurses to help me to the toilet, a smiling man dressed all in white would come straight away and help me. He was so happy and peaceful, with the biggest smile and a bright aura to him. He always came straight to me as soon as the bell rang. The next day, after the second night of his help, I asked another nurse if he would be on duty that night. The staff were very confused, even after my description of him. She told me there weren't any male staffers on duty those past 2 nights, and that none of the porters or other staff wore all white, or would have been answering bells on the ward. So, is that third man, or is that just someone's, probably a relative, or kind of a guardian angel looking out for them? I mean,
I have no idea. That one's not very compelling.
well, what's compelling about it is that it's a kid.
Yeah, that's true.
And that makes me think...
So probably a relative, a deceased relative.
I think so too, because it's a kid.
So maybe it's grandpa.
Not to minimize hospital stories, because I've heard plenty of hospital stories where people see people who've passed in hospitals. But or maybe it was a nurse or a staffer who'd been on, I don't know, previously in life.
Yeah, who knows?
All right.
Some of these things.
Okay, let's go with the next one.
I once fell about 10 feet from a ledge overlooking a lake. The ledge was above a large rocks, and as I fell, I was sure I was about to get gravely hurt. Suddenly, I felt a large hand on my back that caught me and pushed me against the wall. Surprised, I turned around to thank my savior, and no one was there. I was dangling over the rocks, feeling the hand as it pushed me straight against the wall until both my feet were secured. I cannot explain what happened that day, but I know there was something there that saved me.
Wow. So that wasn't just a presence, that was a physical.
Yeah, that was definitely a physical being that had helped.
And
I don't believe that that's third man.
What do you think that is?
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe someone else had fallen off of that previously. When I was reading that, I think the Grand Canyon.
Oh, no, please don't remind me.
No, Ian saw something there, and that was horrific.
Yeah.
We together later on when we were there, I saw something that we just like, nope, run. Like
we
we're
just
not
went the other way.
It's silly of people to basically hang over the ledge to take silly selfies, and realistically, you're not going to get any different shots if you're behind a protected fence.
You're not,
or right at the edge, because it's such a long fall. Like whether it be 10 feet or a mile down, you don't get that sense of
the grandeur of
no.
You know what that story made me think of was the story in Victoria's Most Haunted, where the security guard talks about going up on the roof, and that girl wanted to go on the roof, and she went on the roof not realizing there were no handrails, and she stepped on the roof and she started to fall forward off the
Was
off the
that
roof.
the Young building?
In the Young building,
Yeah,
yes.
that was the Young building.
And she felt someone grab the back of her jacket and pull her back onto the roof.
That's the same thing here.
It's the same thing. So that would be third man. Or whoever,
Perhaps.
or whatever it is.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, can we even define what a third man is? Psychologists want to say it's a self-soothing mechanism. But obviously, somebody grabbing you and pinning you to the side of a rock wall so you don't die is a little more than a self-soothing mechanism.
No, that's very true.
So that's interesting. I don't know how they would explain that.
An angel, maybe.
Who knows?
And angels are not pretty.
No, if you read like actual actual descriptions of angels in the Bible, they're pretty darn scary looking.
Yeah,
which is probably why they're invisible.
Ugly. They're not what's being painted on the Sistine Chapel.
No.
Twice
in my 20s, I fell asleep while driving on a highway. Just in the nick of time, a voice from the back seat said my name in a very commanding tone, waking me up so I could hit the brakes. I'm still very much alive at 76 years old, and I figure someone up there likes me. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's normal. I've heard a few cases of that. So interesting. It's interesting that the reason why we're having this episode is because this third man syndrome, like I said at the beginning, are they ghosts or are they inner speech?
Or
I don't know.
Or are they some sort of outside entity
It's true.
that looks out for us?
Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, the concept of guardian angels is certainly not new.
No, it isn't.
And usually it's kids who are kind of, I mean, we make jokes about it all the time. Oh, I guess my guardian angel is looking out for me today. You know, like we make jokes about it. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's a foreign concept, but what is that really?
Well, my psychologist, Dr. Sloat, had said when I got into that accident, I said it was weird. I felt this odd shift. Google Maps had diverted me to go down Old Island Highway because it suggested that Highway 1 to get into town, the Trans-Canada, was too busy. So it asked me to divert into the right lane and turn right. And at that moment, I felt uneasy.
Like you should.
I was not. Yes. Yeah. I heard a voice say, don't do that. And not 4 minutes later, I got into that tremendous crash.
Wow.
Yeah. Rode off the car.
Well, see, that ties in with another, you know what? I completely forgot about this. Do you remember me telling you about the one and only time I had a scooter accident?
Yes.
That was one of the most powerfully weird experiences because it was sustained. So I'd been riding my scooter for 11 years back and forth to work. So this was not new for me. I'd ridden all kinds of weather, snow, rain, whatever. And one day I got on my scooter, and probably the only reason I have not had a crash is because I'm constantly scanning, right? I'm never beside a car, and I'm constantly scanning for cars
Wise
coming
to
at
not
me.
be beside vehicles.
Well, especially on a scooter.
Mm-hmm.
So I get on the scooter, and I remember something. It was like another voice in my head. It wasn't my voice. And the voice said, be careful. This is your first time. And my conscious brain went, oh, yeah, it's my first time. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And then I went, no. What? No. And I drove, and I'm going along, and I'm probably 3/4 of the way. And the entire way, because it was raining a little bit, the voice in my head was going, be careful. Be careful. It's your first time. It's your first time. I'm like, what do you mean? But somewhere in me was going, yeah, it's my first time. Like there was some weird connection to it. And I'm going, this is so stupid. So I get down into what I call ghetto Cook Street Village in Victoria, where the building supply center is. And there's a crosswalk there. And I always check that crosswalk to see if there's anyone waiting to cross.
That's the one at North Derry.
Yeah, right. And I start to go down there. And I get distracted because there's a pickup truck in front of me with a hand steel cut tailgate. It's beautiful. And I remember looking at it thinking, oh, I wonder if he did that himself or if he got someone to make it. And that's when I realized he stopped and I hadn't. And I pull the brakes. I pull the back brake. It's not going to stop me in time. And I remember very clearly thinking, I'm going to have to pull the front brake as well and just take what comes. And I pulled the front brake, and the wheels went out under me, and I slid under the truck. All the weight went on my leg of the scooter, and I crawled out. My back box had exploded. All my stuff was everywhere. I was super embarrassed. I start throwing things in. People are coming, are you okay? You okay? The truck driver got out. He goes, oh, my God. I said, you did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. Everything's fine. I hauled my scooter out. I got on it, and I went home. And as I'm going home in my deep sense of humiliation, and now my knee is starting to throb, I realized that feeling that had followed me all the way from work was gone. And then I went, well, that was stupid. That's the first time I've ever crashed. And then I went, oh, my first time. And then it made sense. But it was such an odd, because it wasn't my voice. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, when your inner voice is.
Yes.
This was not my voice. And it was such a profound feeling. So when I read that about, or when you talked about you getting a bad feeling about going the route Google wanted you to, that's exactly what I felt too, was something was not right. And I didn't listen to it, or I didn't listen to it close enough. Yeah. It was so weird. So that would be third man syndrome, I guess.
Perhaps.
Wow.
You never know.
All right.
I'm disabled, and I survived the attacks on the Twin Towers. I was buried under the debris for about 15 hours.
Wow.
But I was never alone. I kept hearing a voice that said his name was Michael. When I was weakest, he would just keep talking
He would just keep me talking to him.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
My apologies. When I was weakest, he would just keep me talking to him. When I was rescued, I found out that there was never a man named Michael anywhere in the area. I still wonder the voice was that saved me from becoming another death of that terrible day.
That's really interesting.
That's really poorly written.
Yes.
I'm
That's
sorry.
Not the point. Not the point.
Just stop.
They probably have a brain trauma.
Fair.
No, that's really interesting, though.
And I hate that word fair. Sorry, for the record, I do not like the word fair.
You're so
When people respond to me fair, I'm like, of course it's fair.
Okay,
Life's not fair.
Calm
But-
down, autism boy.
Yes,
Just
okay.
subtle.
So, anyways, yeah.
No, I've heard of that in other kind of building collapses, mudslides.
Again, it's
where
another
people are
traumatic
trapped.
event where we hear things.
15 hours.
I wonder if it is an angel.
15 hours.
Well, Michael,
I know. That's interesting.
isn't that interesting? Michael, are you around? I have questions. I was just watching the movie Contact. And I love
a
that
good
movie. Oh my gosh.
That's a really good movie.
It's so funny because, spoiler alert, when the vessel she rides on drops through the transporter, let's say, it just appears to fall through, but she was gone for 18 hours in that split second, the one frame that the transporter was no longer there.
Yeah.
And I love the part where, is it Angela Bassett? Yes, she says, have you read, I assume that you've read the findings of the confidential findings report. And the main guy who was basically annihilating her on the witness stand said, I did. And she's like, well, I assume you read, Angela Bassett says, I assume you read the part about the static. And he's like, go on. And she's like, well, it wasn't that it recorded static that interested me. It was that it recorded approximately 18 hours of it. And he's like, he says, that's interesting.
That was a good movie because I think it brought up a lot of good concepts and good questions. And
Well, it really does bring into context how big the universe is and all this concept of time and,
yeah.
the theory of general relativity
Yeah.
and to different observers, time passes at different rates.
Yep.
It's
To
interesting.
humans, time is linear.
Yeah.
But to the universe, time is a circle.
Yeah, it's a process.
Right?
I
It's
wouldn't
kinda cool.
know if it's a circle, but I would say it's a process.
I'm voting it's a circle.
Okay.
All right. Next,
Is that the fifth discipline coming from you?
next story.
It's a process. That's the fifth discipline.
That's a bit discipline. Trust the process. Yeah. When my husband was in his 20s, he fell asleep while driving and crashed into a telephone pole. He was hurt and remembered a teenage kid knocking on his window and telling him he called the police and not to get out of the car because there were live wires everywhere. When my husband was finally rescued, there was no sign of the kid. The police say that no one had called them. They just came because the power was out. Not only that, but they said there was no way anyone could have gotten close to the car on account of the wires. And if my husband had tried to get out of the car, they probably would have killed him. My husband so vividly remembers the kid, he believes he was real. But his mom believes it was his guardian angel.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that is interesting. What do you think of that one?
I'm not sure. It's
It's very typical of it.
yeah, he fell asleep and got into an accident. Sorry. Bless you. Speaking of Michael.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no, he was definitely warned not to go to the car or would have killed him.
Yeah.
So something was there.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I don't know much to say about that one.
That's okay. You don't have to say something. It's a part of the beauty of this is we're just sharing them. Right?
So a few years ago, we were on family vacation in Virginia Beach. The water was pretty choppy and the waves kept knocking me down before I could even get properly in. So as I was pregnant, not me, but as she was pregnant,
Thank
I
you,
decided
Jason,
to
for
relax on the
clarifying.
sand instead. My husband and my 3 siblings went out swimming without realizing it. My husband and one of my sisters got pulled out pretty far. They were far from everyone else swimming, and a lifeguard was blowing the whistle that they need to come back in. The water was so rough. They were having a hard time getting any closer to shore and genuinely thought they might drown. My sister's pretty petite, so my husband ended up carrying her piggyback style back to the shore. They were both pretty scared and tired. My husband told me that something or someone helped them make it back. Felt like someone gave them a push. The next day, there was a perfect handprint on his back, on the right side by his shoulder blade. It looked like a reverse sunburn in the perfect shape of a hand. Someone was definitely looking out for them that day. That's from Ohio, USA.
And that's got proof.
Interesting. Yeah. So
that's really different. That's not just, how do you psychologically explain that one away?
I don't know.
That's really interesting.
Somehow I don't think that's an angel if it's in the shape of a hand, but you never know.
Well, angels can take whatever form they want.
That's very true, actually.
So it probably would feel safest.
I like to think that there are angels out there.
I don't see why not.
You know,
why not?
If we assume that there are demons, well, they're just the same thing.
Yeah. Opposite ends of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
All right, next one. I was dancing with my friend at a foam party, which is where they hang a machine from the ceiling that dumps tons of bubbles onto the dance floor. The foam was super deep under the machine, and the floor was super slippery because of the soapy bubbles. This just sounds like a terrible idea.
It's a bad idea.
My friend slipped into the foam, and I fell down and fell down to the floor under the bubbles with her.
Surprise.
When I tried to breathe, it was like I was drowning. The foam filled my lungs like water. No. I couldn't open my eyes. My feet and hands kept slipping, so I couldn't stand up, and no one could hear us choking and screaming over the music. I was slipping all over on the floor, holding onto my friend's shirt. Just as I thought we were literally going to drown in the bubbles, someone pulled us up. It was as though we'd been lifted or pushed, because there's no way anyone could have grabbed me by the arm. I was way too slippery. Heather and I couldn't even hold hands. Our skin was so slick. I was lucky to just hang on to her shirt. We came out of the bubbles, choking and gasping, covered in soap, clinging onto each other. When I wiped my eyes clear, there was no one there except the other people dancing around us. They were all oblivious to us, though. They didn't even know we'd fallen, and no one had seen anyone pull us out, nor did they ask if we were okay. Needless to say, I never went to a foam party again.
Well, it's an interesting thing to do, isn't it?
It doesn't sound like a smart plan.
No.
Yeah, but it's the kind of things you do when you're young and you don't know any better, or maybe you're young and you don't think through consequences.
That's very true.
Right?
Oh, we've done this drive.
We have. Next one.
I was driving north from Portland to Seattle for a last-minute appointment. I was very tired, and the raining weather wasn't helping at all. I was using my phone as a GPS, and it fell off the mounter dashboard holder and onto the footwell below. I was on a major freeway, and in my tired state, started to scramble to find the phone. I know it's dumb, but I didn't know where I was going. At this point, I could barely see the road as I was looking down for the device, and all of a sudden I felt my steering wheel jerk to the left and then to the right again. I popped back up to see what was going on. I narrowly missed hitting a road worker.
Oh my God.
By maybe a foot by swerving out and back on the lane again. I had not moved the wheel.
Wow.
Grandmother used to say, "Don't drive faster than your angels can fly," and I could feel her in that moment. It's interesting because that's Interstate 5, and that's pretty fast.
Yeah.
So you have to be pretty silly if you don't know where you're going, because, I mean, if you're on Interstate 5 heading north.
Jason, not the point of the story.
It's just, why would you care about your phone?
Jason, not the point of the story.
Seriously.
Jason.
Leave it.
Focus.
You're doing 75 miles an hour.
They weren't looking, and they felt the steering wheel jerk to the left and then to the right.
Yeah.
And as a result, they didn't kill someone.
No, I agree.
That's amazing.
But I would leave the phone because who cares?
Okay, yeah.
It's the interstate.
I know. And the person acknowledged it was a dumb thing to do.
It was, yes.
Focus,
because you're literally heading north.
Focus.
You just stay on the interstate and you'll end up, well, you can't miss Tacoma. You can't miss Seattle.
Not the point. Not the point.
But I mean, it's not what I'm trying to emphasize. It's not like Portland is 5 minutes away from downtown Seattle.
Okay.
That's my point.
Thank you, Jason.
Leave it alone.
Focus on the story.
So, you know what, listeners? If your phone falls, pull off
Jason,
the interstate.
The point of the story was not as a public safety message.
Well, that's all I see. I can't tell you how many accidents I have seen in the States.
I know.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are because of
probably because of silly things like that, because people are so used to their silly GPS.
You know what the number 1, 2, and 3 top 3 things are that are killing people on the roads?
Texting for sure.
Well, number 1, speed.
Yeah,
too fast. Number 2, texting and driving.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
number 3 is alcohol. It
Yeah.
used to be absolutely speed and alcohol were the top
Yeah,
2,
but
but
now
not
it's
anymore.
texting.
It's
It's
texting.
because people don't realize that when you're doing 75 miles an hour and you send a quick text, that quick text, you've covered 300-400 feet.
Yeah. And
It's
you've
not
missed
quick.
everything in that time.
You,
Yeah.
don't- you think that and there's sudden slowdowns in the freeway. Just like if you've driven in LA like I have, or if you've driven through big major centers like Seattle and Portland and a million other ones, there's immense slowdowns. You could be doing 75 miles an hour, and within 300 feet, you're all of a sudden doing 10 miles an hour.
Or even stopped.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you could be in the fast lane.
If
Ironically enough, usually it's the fast lane that you come to a
Yeah.
full stop.
And if you ever want to see some truly horrific traffic safety videos, watch the ones from Australia. The Transportation Association of Australia. They have put out some absolute. They're profound and they're incredible, and I highly recommend them.
But I'm glad that that worker was safe.
Yeah, that's
regardless
crazy.
of that. So interesting.
All right. I was driving back to college my freshman year, and I got totally lost in a heavily wooded area. This was before GPS and cell phones. So
Thank gosh.
So I was just, oh my God. So I was just stuck on this road alone. I couldn't find my way to the highway I was looking for, and as the sun set, a huge storm broke out and it started pouring rain. The rain was so heavy I could barely see the road. Suddenly, a house with all the lights on appeared. It was the only house I'd seen for miles. So, against my better judgment, I parked the car and went running for the door. The house had a fence, but no gate to open, so I hopped the fence and started banging on the door asking for help. A woman opened the door and invited me inside. The house was empty, except for a big beanbag chair in the kitchen. She said they'd just moved in and her husband had left to get something, so it was just us. I was soaking wet, so she offered me a change of clothes and poured me a cup of tea and let me use her phone to call my parents, but they didn't answer. So I left her number on the machine so they could call her back and thank her. She said I was really close to the highway, but understood I had already had a rough night. So she offered to drive and guide me to the highway so I wouldn't get lost again. Turns out, if I just kept driving another minute up the road, I would have hit the highway. My mom called the number I gave the next day, but we got an error saying the number did not exist.
Wow.
Despite having driven that road many times later in my college career, I never saw the house again.
Interesting.
I've heard of that before. That it's a kind of a
Phantom
time of
houses?
need. Phantom hosts, yeah, who in a time of need. There's one who talked
That's
about
very nice. That
the
they
best
offered
soup
a
she ever had was
change of clothes.
she ended up getting lost, and this family took her in and said, no, stay for dinner. And she had this soup, and it was the best soup she ever had. And then she got back on the road, and when she was coming back home, she wanted to swing by and thank them, and she bought them a little gift. And she got there, and there was no house. There had been a house at one point, but there was just a very old, cracked, weedy foundation.
Wow.
Yeah. So times of need, sometimes these things
Like Ginter's mansion.
appear like Ginter's mansion,
There's not much there.
but it's creepy.
It is totally creepy.
It's
that
in
place.
Prince George, and
Yeah.
it was the man who invented canned beer
Canned beer. So the cans are an invention.
from Prince George.
Yeah,
Before that, it was
PG.
all bottles.
Yeah.
Um,
PG.
And he built a very big mansion, and now it's been raised, but they left the foundation and turned it into like basically a park. But you can go up there, and during the day, it's got an odd feeling, but at night, apparently, it's really creepy.
Yeah, I used to go with my friends out there at 11 p.m. just for fun.
Ugh.
We had to bring Old English just to survive.
Which is a type of horrible beer.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally cheap.
Yeah.
It's like a 40 of Oldie. That's what we had.
40 of old.
I think it was like $4 for a bottle of that garbage way back then.
warm urine.
I always thought, I always said it tasted like fermented mushrooms.
All right, you're up.
Interesting. Years ago, I was heading back by train from my parents' house to university. It was late, and I had my head resting on the window with my eyes closed. Suddenly, a voice started telling me to move. It got louder and more urgent, but when I opened my eyes, there was no one yelling at me on the train. The other few passengers were all minding their business. The voice in my head got louder and louder, more and more urgent. I felt silly moving, but I finally couldn't ignore the voice any longer, so I scooted a seat over and sat upright, and then a bullet came through the train window.
Wow.
Right where my head had been. I'd have been done for had I stayed where I was.
Wow.
I'd have been done.
I'd have been done for had I stayed where I was.
Oh yeah, okay.
There's just no punctuation.
Yeah.
That's intense.
That is. It's
And again,
interesting.
just a voice. Just a voice.
These people write in strange prose.
Oh, stop it.
I'm trying to read it here, but
My father-in-law told me that my husband, who was a premature baby, was very fragile. As they were coming home from the hospital, he was coming down a very icy, slippery set of stairs with my husband in his arms when all of a sudden he tripped and he almost fell. Someone caught him literally midair.
wow.
He turned around and no one was there. He told me it was humanly possible. It wasn't humanly possible for him to have done this alone, as he was pretty much on the ground when he was held up by the arms. He's sure someone saved his baby that day for some reason.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
That is very lucky.
Very lucky. And again, just there.
Random abilities,
Yep.
random places, random times, and yet some people are able to survive these things.
And some people don't.
Yeah, you're right.
So
You're right. Some people
how
don't.
does that work?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
I was a teenager in the 80s and was driving alone at night in a rainstorm. Why is it always a rainstorm? I hate driving at night, especially in rain. Anyway, I ended up hitting a pothole and my tire popped.
Dun, dun, dun.
I was kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I somehow made it to a parking lot. It was empty from what I could tell. There was obviously before cell phones or anything, so I was going to try and change my tire myself when I realized I didn't have a spare. I sat in my seat trying to think of what to do when I heard a tap on my passenger window. There was a man's voice saying, "You need a hand, miss?" I felt my car being jacked up and heard the sound of someone messing with my tire. I remember clutching a tire iron in my hands as I got out of the car to try to get a better look at the guy and see what the hell was going on. As suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. I sat in my car again, still thinking. A few minutes later, the rain cleared up a bit and I made my way to the store whose parking lot I ended up in to try to use their phone and call my dad. My dad showed up with a spare tire only to tell me my tires were totally fine. So now I always wonder if any of it was real at all.
Interesting. And who can say?
I don't know. We had a flat.
Yeah.
It's the only flat I've ever had.
You changed it in like 4 minutes.
Oh, well, I heard rustling in the bush, and
I remember
were in a
that.
very
We were
remote area.
We were very much in grizzly bear country, so we were not messing around because
and
the sun was going
setting
down. Yeah.
down. So I was fast.
We were running on fear.
That was the irony. Was why we got it. It was the same situation. We hit a pothole.
Yeah.
We had brand new tires, thankfully.
Yeah.
So there was replaced under warranty.
Yeah.
But yes, the sun was cresting. We were coming between Grand Prairie and Tumbler Ridge on the
It's called the
Heritage Highway,
which, as it turns out, is a gravel road.
Yes, and as the sun was cresting, I hit a massive pothole I didn't see until the absolute last second, and boom, and yeah, I have never changed a tire that fast in my life.
I was impressed. And then you were pretty overwhelmed, like tired-wise, because you just had it. Yeah. And you're like, can you drive now? And I'm like, 4.5 hours to PG. So I think we rolled into PG at like 3:30
and just
in the morning.
to put context, normally Tumbler Ridge is not that far, but when you're driving on a friggin' donut on the front,
go that fast.
No, you're restricted to 80 clicks. So we drove very carefully that night. Well, Ian did. I fell asleep.
You were overwhelmed.
Wondering
totally
if every corner we were going to die with a donut on this stupid car. Oh.
It was December of 1986, and I was about 5 when this happened. My father was a Marine, and the Marines brought their families together for a day of hot dogs, baseball, and fun. The park we were at had a paved walking trail. It was basically just a really big circle around the park. Little 5-year-old me and I had my hot dog and went for a walk on the trail. At the furthest point on the trail from where everyone else was, I began to choke. Oh, this is so common with kids and hot dogs. I took a bite of hot dog that was too big and was having difficulty chewing it, which led me to accidentally swallowing it before it was ready to be swallowed. I knew I was done for. I stood there looking at the ground, hot dog in left hand and right hand, when I felt the stuck dog right below my voice box. I was trying my hardest to push or vomit it out. I began to think, I'm going to die. That very second, I had the urge to look up. To my left, not 3 feet away, was a tiny little old lady. She was the straight-up stereotypical image of a sweet little old lady sitting on a bench smiling at me. I quickly motioned to her that I was choking and needed help. In her soft, sweet, smiling old lady voice, she said, "Oh, I know. You need to just relax. Everything's going to be fine." Seeing her happy calmness made her instructions to just relax seem like a good idea. So I did. And the moment I began to relax was the moment I felt the hot dog moving back up my throat and back into my mouth and onto the ground at my feet. I was in shock at seeing a literal half of a hot dog on the ground and couldn't believe I took that big of a bite. I'm not sure how long I was staring at that hot dog, but it couldn't have been more than a second or two. When I looked up again, there was no bench and there was no old lady. I just lost it, crying, standing there until one of the other Marines noticed me and came to check on me. When he asked what was wrong, I blubberingly mumbled out through tears what had happened. He stood up, as quick as spit sizzles, looking around for the old lady, and then walked me back to the rest of the families.
Wow.
I wonder if whatever shows up and needs to be seen for some reason, because a lot of these they're not seen.
No, they're not.
I wonder if they show up in like the least terrifying form to that person.
Yeah, it could be. Well, it could be it could be a manifestation of the person's comfort. So if they found comfort in their little old lady grandmother, for example,
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It kind of brings us back to contact. I want to do, let's do a circle back. Let's go around through this process and talking ops management.
Okay, but the show's getting
MBA
long.
ops management. Anyways,
So we don't want to go too
anyways, the whole point was who did the aliens manifest
as her dad, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it was the most comforting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe. Yeah. So there's some
So let us
theory to the water.
segue back into stories.
Oh my God. You just go.
I was driving on a somewhat rural road on a very windy winter's day. The snow was being whipped across the road, and a sudden gust of wind hit the back end of my car. This caused me to fishtail, and I lost control. I shot across oncoming traffic off an embankment and rolled the car into a field.
Yikes.
As I was airborne, I felt something sitting next to me in the passenger seat. After the car flipped 360 degrees and slammed back down on the tires, I heard a voice in my head tell me I was unharmed and felt a gentle caress across my forehead. Once I had determined my neck wasn't broken and I could move, I saw that it was covered in windshield glass. It was everywhere except for the passenger seat. There was only glass bits around the edges of the seat, like someone had been sitting there.
Wow.
I didn't have a scratch or a bruise on me. The police officers and the tow truck driver couldn't believe I was uninjured given the state of my car. Since then, I have tried extra hard to be a better human to repay who or whatever saved me.
That's amazing.
That day.
That's cool. And the glass being just around the edges of the seat.
Yeah. Interesting.
That is interesting. I'm nearly 75 years of age and haven't thought of this incident for years. I was raised in North Alabama, the youngest of three brothers. Our family would often vacation on the panhandle of the Florida Gulf Coast. On one occasion, I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. We stopped for a picnic at a public park near a backwater estuary. Uh-oh, I'm thinking alligators. I was waiting and stepped off into water deeper than I realized. I turned towards the shore and tried to clamber back, but knew I was literally over my head in water. Suddenly, I felt hands under my armpits, lifting me into the shallow water until my feet touched the bottom. I immediately turned to see who was there, thinking it was one of my brothers, but there was no one else in the water. I didn't say anything to anyone at the time, not knowing what to say, and to this day I can't quite grasp what really happened.
So another invisible hand.
But again, I say, why him and not some other kid who drowned that summer? Do you know what I mean?
Know. Yeah.
Like, what's the deciding factor here?
Psychopaths versus sociopaths versus normal people?
It's just interesting. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows what determines that? I don't believe we're ever meant to find out.
Maybe not until we're dead ourselves, and then we get assigned a kid.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Yeah, assigned a kid. Who knows? When I was about 18, I was in a terrible accident, a car accident. While waiting for an emergency services to arrive, there was an old man wearing shorts and a t-shirt standing nearby. The car was a wreck and my legs were trapped. The old man directed me on how to get out of the car and told me to get my phone and call 911. After emergency services arrived, I was told that the car was so wrecked they were waiting for the jaws of life to free me.
Wow.
I know I could figure out how I managed to get myself out. I was also declared deceased by the first emergency vehicle that stopped. I told them about the old man, but no one in the car was with me or in the accident scene remembers him. I was the only one to see the old man. I'm still grateful to whoever he was helping me to get out of that car.
There we go.
Wow.
And interesting, it was an old lady, and then this one.
An old man.
An old man. Huh. Grandparents, great-grandparents, relatives? Who knows?
I don't know. Maybe it's just Michael. Maybe he does a lot of good deeds. I have no idea. It'd be interesting if we saw him in a weird way, in his actual angelic form.
I'm good. It was 1 a.m. I was only a day away from my due date with my first pregnancy. My husband and I were sleeping, anticipating the many sleepless nights that would soon become the new normal. That's for sure. I felt a sweet kiss on my cheek and a comforting, warm feeling. As I woke up from the kiss, I rolled over to find my husband, still snoring, and facing the opposite direction. The second I realized he couldn't have kissed my cheek, I felt a pop, and my water broke. I've always believed that it was my much-beloved grandmother who gave me the kiss, blessing me as I began the journey to bring my daughter into the world. We're both named after her. Oh, that's sweet.
Wow.
That's really sweet.
That is very sweet.
Yeah.
The kiss of water breakage.
That's disgusting.
Well, that's exactly what it basically said.
So if I feel a kiss in the middle of the night and pee the bed, you won't be mad?
Yeah, well, no. I would be annoyed. But that's really sweet regardless.
That is actually a sweet story.
Years ago, I was stopped at a toll booth where I had to grab an exit ticket. To reach the ticket, I had to unbuckle my seatbelt. There was a line of cars behind me, so I was going to just go through and put my seatbelt back on later. I heard a male voice, "Put your seatbelt on." My female friend in the car was asleep. I ignored the voice, then heard, "Put your seatbelt on now." I did. Then seconds later, I was clipped by a tractor trailer and flew over the median into the path of an oncoming car. The car was total, but my friend and I survived. I had bruises where the seatbelt kept me in the car. It would save my life. If I weren't for the seatbelt, I would have gone through the windshield.
So another voice.
Of course, yeah.
So voices and grabs and shoving
Yeah.
seem to be the thing in some ways.
But if you hear that voice, listen to it.
Listen to it. That's
where
the biggest thing of all of
Let us
these.
circle back to Dr. Sludge.
Oh, stop.
Anyways, apparently it is becoming a thing where psychologists are recognizing that this is more real
That's cool.
than it's just
I'm really glad to hear that.
like a phantom belief.
I'm glad to hear that.
She said it's starting to become a recognized symptom.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it is.
That's
If you have
good.
Third man syndrome or whatever. You wanna call this
Absolutely.
nonsense.
My mother was going through cancer treatment and wasn't feeling great after her most recent one that afternoon. She went to bed early and I stayed up playing video games on the other side of the house. Around midnight, I felt a hand touch my shoulder and had a really strong feeling that I should check up on Mom. I found her passed out on the floor and took her to the hospital where she received an emergency blood transfusion. She's now 10 years cancer-free and thriving, but that night it was like someone else was there watching out for her. Wow. How would you feel if you hadn't checked on her?
No doubt. Moral of the story, stop playing video games.
Okay. Keep going.
That's fun, though. I'm glad she survived and she's cancer-free.
Yay.
That's good news. I was driving on a stretch of freeway that turns into highway with 3 stoplights before turning onto the freeway again. I was waiting at a red light when someone slammed into me at full speed from behind, not realizing the light hadn't changed to green yet. My car skidded 20 feet from the sheer force of the massive truck hitting my sad little 96 Escort. The seat I was in broke. I was immediately crying in shock and confusion. A woman appeared at my window and patted me on the shoulder, telling me it was going to be okay. I got out and spoke to the other driver, who was all apologies, explaining he had been watching an erratic driver behind him when the accident occurred. It all seemed normal until I realized that my window was still rolled up, unbroken, and there was no way that anyone could have reached in and touched my shoulder. The woman that came to comfort me was nowhere to be found. I was uninjured, other than a little whiplash, and other than losing my vehicle that day, I was more upset as I had just filled up my gas tank. That's true. Usually you get into accidents just after you fill up your gas tank.
I know.
know.
That's interesting, though, that happened.
It is another old lady.
Yeah. Yeah, bringing comfort.
Maybe it's just the projection of someone being wise, and that wiseness is something that we will listen to.
Maybe.
The perception of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Interesting. I was in the Uyuni Desert in Bolivia doing a 4-day tour in the salty desert. My mom, my uncle, 3 of my friends, and a guide and I were in a Jeep, heading up to the geysers at a 5,000 plus meter altitude. My body didn't handle the altitude and lack of oxygen well, and I started vomiting and fainting so much we had to stop the car. Being in this situation for too long can kill you due to the lack of oxygen in your brain and lungs, so we were stressed out. Out of nowhere, a couple appeared on a tandem bike. They were French, like me, and were crossing the desert like that. Long story short, they just so happened to have the exact right pill to help me with my sickness. They gave me a pill, I got in the car, and when we turned back to wave at them, they were nowhere to be found. Everyone saw them, but they were completely gone in an instant. My mom believes they were sent by my guardian angel. That's cool, because everybody saw them.
Yeah. That's interesting that people get
crazy.
to see them as opposed to just the persons themselves.
Yeah, that is really wild.
That's interesting.
Huh. There
I
you
wonder why
go.
some people can see them and some people can't.
I don't know. I think it's when they have to be seen. Like, how would they give that person the pill if they couldn't be seen?
True.
So it's like they will do the extra steps if what is required needs to come through some sort of physical vision or touch or giving them something.
A manifestation.
Yeah. Otherwise, they are happy to just work as a shove or a grab or a pull or a voice. It's interesting.
Things that make you go,
Oh, talk about 1990s. Jesus.
CNC Music Factory.
Stop it. Just read the story.
I was alone downstairs watching TV, and my son was asleep upstairs in his crib. I heard a male voice very close by say 2 words, "Go now." Startled, I jumped up, and I took to the stairs 2 at a time to my son's room, where I found he'd somehow moved his entire crib. He moved it enough that he could reach the silver metal airplane mobile, put the weighted ball into his mouth, and is silently choking on it.
Wow.
I flipped him over my arm and did the maneuver to expel it, and we both sat on the floor crying in relief. No sound came from the monitor we had. If not for that clear warning, he wouldn't be 37 years old now.
Wow.
Wow.
That is intense. That is intense. But again, what
Yeah.
about the babies who
Do
one
choke on
warned
something.
anybody? Yeah.
Wonder.
And our last story for this evening. I'm thinking we need to do another one of these.
It is. Yeah,
It's
I agree.
really interesting. I think we
This
need to
is-
do another episode on this.
This is deep.
It's really interesting. Please let us know if you like this story and you're interested in this. Let us know if you like it. Do you want to hear another one? Because we're ready for it if you do.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And so our last story. In 2010, my husband and I were barreling down the highway at unsafe speeds in the pouring rain. Oh, it sounds like us. We were really young and arguing over how much he spent on a TV. Also us. Suddenly we began hydroplaning. The car went sideways on the highway and then straightened back out.
Not us.
No.
It's
There
because
was
I run Michelin.
there was a semi coming out of a subdivision, and we barely missed hitting it. We started heading straight for a small group of trees. I reached back and grabbed the front of our very young son's car seat, thinking somehow I was protecting him. I looked at my husband, and he said, "I love you." And it was like everything suddenly slowed down for a moment. I remember hearing this voice that sounded urgent saying, "You have to pick up your legs. You have to pick up your legs now." I immediately pulled them into the front of my seat. I looked forward, and time was no longer slowed down, and I watched in horror as we headed straight for the trees and slammed into them. The next thing I remember is this wave of pain shooting up my spine. I threw back my head and screamed. I also quickly realized my foot was hurting, but was stuck. The floorboard had pushed upwards, meaning the dashboard, and the dashboard was pushed forward and had met my seat. My right foot had slipped out of the seat and was stuck between the dashboard and my seat. I eventually managed to dislodge it. It was broken in 3 places, and my back was broken in 5. I have been permanently disabled ever since. My husband also broke his right femur in half. Luckily, our young son was unharmed. We believe we hit the trees at 80 miles per hour at
Holy,
least. And if
way
I
too
hadn't picked up my
fast.
legs when I did, then they would have been completely crushed. I may live a life of constant pain and maybe slowly losing my ability to walk from a disease I developed from the accident, but it's not a life that I take for granted. Everyone that has seen pictures of the car say how lucky we are to be alive. They really have no idea how right they are. She would have bled out.
Yeah.
Her legs getting, I think it would have severed her legs and she would have bled out in the
Yeah.
car. She
Yeah.
would have been dead. Wow.
That's too fast.
80 in rain. I agree with you.
I'm surprised they weren't hydroplaning already. But, maybe they drove on Michelin.
Oh, Jesus. Stop with the Michelins.
Well, because so much is riding on your tires.
Oh, no. This is not a product placement.
I love Michelin.
Oh,
but
just stop it.
that's
All right.
okay. Regardless, I'm glad they're okay. But speed,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
dropping your phone.
No.
What is the lessons to be learned here? Let's not go fast.
Don't go fast
And if your phone falls,
and leave the phone alone.
Yeah, don't just try to reach over it on Interstate 5.
No, please don't.
It's not like you're going to get to Seattle in 5 minutes.
Not just for you, for everyone around
I mean, if you're going to get to Seattle from Portland in 5 minutes, you're traveling faster than a jet.
Which would be cool, but the phone's the least of your worries.
Yeah.
All right, friends, we are going to be right back after this, and we'll see you on the other side.
And we're back on the other side.
We are back on the other side, and
But we're not on the other side.
there were no loud voices.
We were on the other
Oh,
side.
jeez. I was going to tell you my story. We were at a gas station. I was probably 9 or 10, and my mom said, "Can you take the dog and go, walk her so she can go to the bathroom?" And I very foolishly wandered across the highway to go to a field because the field looked nicer.
That must have been when you were you would have been driving the Suburban.
Probably the Suburban. And I took the dog across the highway and wasn't really paying attention. And I got almost all the way across the highway. And I suddenly remember turning and looking, and there was a semi. Just basically, I felt like I could reach out and touch it. I remember it being so close to me. And I froze. I just froze. I get it why deer do that, when they...
Yes.
Because
children do.
You don't know what to do. You get overwhelmed.
Was that off the Deerfoot?
No. This was like a major highway, like the QE2 kind of highway running between Edmonton and Alberta. Edmonton and Calgary.
That's what I was
Highway
asking,
2.
the Deerfoot.
That's not... Okay.
Yes, that is Highway 2.
Only in town. Stop interrupting me. And then just as I'm about to become road pizza, I felt very distinctly 2 hands on my back, shoved me super hard. And I know this was not me running because I ended up flying and landing face first on the grass on the other side.
Wow.
And it was intense.
That is intense.
And I went back and told my mom, and she said, "No, that didn't happen."
Oh.
But that was my mom.
Yeah.
Something unexplainable didn't happen. That's how my mom dealt with those things.
Well, that's how a lot of people deal with them.
It's true. It's true because it's easier than trying to deal with the consequences. All this time we have been doing this, I have also been making sure we get our ghost stories we have heard out for our patrons.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of solo ones now because Jay's just been way too busy with school. We're going to be putting out a new set of them. The ones I really have enjoyed doing is from the book called A Gathering of Ghosts.
Think the Kool-Aid Man and the
Okay, stop. Again with the commercials. Yeah,
Do you remember that? That was so fun.
I wasn't cool with him crashing through walls because I thought that was wildly unpredictable and it made me scared.
Family Guy did a skit on it. That's funny.
So yeah, The Gathering of Ghosts was where I've been pulling the stories for the last ones, and they're a little bit different than our usual ones. But that is to say, our patrons get those. Every week there isn't an episode. We do the Ghost Stories We Have Heard episode for our patrons. So
yes,
if you're interested in that, come on over to Patreon. Patreon.com/ghosts and bears, and you will find us there. We'd love to have you join us. We're going to say thank you to our current patrons who are amazing, and they include
Michelle,
Taylor,
Dawn,
Robin,
Maria,
Gina,
Sherry,
Marion,
Kathleen,
Alexa,
Mary Frances,
Christopher,
David,
Ashley,
Jeremiah,
Elizabeth,
BB Nix,
Melinda,
Jordan,
Tammy,
Taya,
Evan,
Arwin,
Steve,
Kyle and Charlotte,
Catherine,
and Myri.
Yay!
So we have some interesting news. We're going to be having Kyle and Charlotte join us on a soon-to-be episode.
Soon-to-be episode of Ghosts in My House.
Ghosts in My House.
And Kyle and I have a long history together. We realized today we have been friends for over 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
We were in a band together, which we will talk about when we talk to him. And Kyle and his lovely wife, Charlotte, or wife-to-be, Charlotte, have accidentally moved into an incredibly old haunted house in
Sanishton.
Yeah, in Sanishton, and we're going to talk to them. We actually went to the house,
Yeah.
and they said, we're not going to tell you where the creepy ghosts are. We want you to figure it out.
It was fairly
and we
obvious,
did. We
yeah.
did. There were 2 places.
Yeah.
And we figured it right. Stop it. And we figured it out right away. So we're going to enjoy
My thing.
talking to you about that. So we're going to have Kyle and Charlotte coming on and
Yes.
doing a Ghost in My House episode, which we haven't done for a really long time.
That's
so
going to be a lot of fun.
It will be fun.
And it's our time.
Yeah.
We're going to give you back some of your time. I think that's how we end all our business meetings lately in accounting. It's
I'm going to give you back
We're
some
going
of
to
your
give you
time.
back some of your time. You get another 20 seconds,
Oh
and
my
that saves you that
gosh.
hour.
Well, before we do that, we're also going to say, hey, if you're wanting to wear some merch,
Yeah, have some merch.
we've got
Buy our merch.
our Redbubble store, Ghosts and Bears, and
Yeah.
also you will get merch for becoming a Patreon as
Yeah.
well. So don't forget that, and all that money
Flash our merch around.
really helps support the podcast. And
Yes,
keeps
it does.
going.
Yeah.
So that'll be
Keep
good.
hemorrhaging money out for this podcast.
Yes, we do. And
I know. I write the checks.
also
That's so old school.
don't forget to write us. Review us on iTunes. That would be great.
iTunes? Yeah.
That is free, and it helps us out huge, especially if you give us a beautiful 5-star review. So
Please let us know how
do
we
that.
do.
And
we
if-
hope you have fun. Please drop us stories. We haven't heard stories.
send
in
us
a while.
stories. I've got some in the hopper. We've got
Keep it freakish.
We've got one friend from England who's going to share his stories. We've got another friend from Nashville who's going to
Yeah.
share his stories. So we do have some stories in the hopper. We're going to be talking about.
We're going to
doing
raise
some
the
episodes.
roof. Raising the roof.
Okay, you're doing 90s again. You're really caught in a 90s loop tonight.
Apparently so. 90s. This CNC Music Factory.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. Otherwise, we want to thank you guys for being with us. Thank you so much for continuing to support the show, and we hope you enjoy it. Again, I know this one was a little bit different. It's 4th season. We're going off book now. So it wasn't exactly the actual ghost story with the actual history and the actual place, but we did get
wanted to
the actual ghost
discuss
story with the
some
actual history.
cool twists on
Yeah.
potential ghosts.
Absolutely. It's exciting.
Third Man Syndrome.
Yes. So
Check it out.
We will be doing probably another episode.
Ask Siri about it.
We both
If
enjoyed
you
that.
use Siri, you go ahead and ask her. Alexa, you just say, Alexa, tell me about Third Man Syndrome. Or
Just
even Google.
Stop. All right.
Use your AI.
We are going to be
Chat GPT.
We are going to be back with you next month, either with another Third Man episode, or we might be doing the Ghost in the House episode.
Yeah,
I
let
don't
us know how this one goes.
We'll see how it goes. All right.
Let's hope our mics work this time.
Oh, they did. Don't worry. I
Thank
double,
gosh.
triple, quadruple checked them.
We've had some weird horror things happen in this studio. We've never had issues like this in Victoria.
No, we did not like
Just
this. Not like
Everything
this.
has been so awry.
But it's okay today.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. We love you. And remember, if you're looking for a podcast with the actual ghost stories
For the actual history.
in the actual place,
Come to us.
Ghosts and Bears. Take care. Bye.
Bye.